Jeff, to get us started, give me two truths and a lie, please, sir.
So this is going to be more of a, I guess, multiple choice, if you will, but it's going to be the longest plane ride that I've ever been on. Is it 9 hour? Well, there's two of three. So 9 hours, 15 hours, or 24 hours. What do you think the lie is?
Okay, so which one have you not been on? A 9 hour, a 15, and a 24-hour plane
So,
ride?
correct,
Hmm,
correct.
man. Well, I guess I'll just go in the middle.
The 15. So it's actually the 9 hour.
Okay.
So yeah, so the 15, if the 15 was from DC to Korea, and the 24 hours from North Carolina to Kazakhstan, all the way. So a little bit involved. So but it was 24 hours, which is a long time, not to mention on an airplane where you can't get any fresh air. So
And that's when you were serving the country in the army?
correct, in the army. So it was being all I could be, I guess you would say.
Yes. 24-hour plane ride. And that's not like business class, or maybe it is.
No, no, it was on a C-17 plane, which they call a Globemaster. And it's hard to explain unless you've been in one, how large it actually is. It's kind of overwhelming. And when you're in one of those things, there's in a lot of instances, unless you're in a heavy storm, you really feel no turbulence, because it's like flying a city, if you will, a lot of times.
Yeah. So what do you just sort of talk to your flight mates? Are you playing cards?
Yeah, you
What
try to sleep as much as
uh,
you try to sleep, but that's easier said than done.
yeah.
And you just try to just try to pass time, read a book. It's crazier things, crazier suggestions have been other than just to simply read a book. So wasn't a bad idea back then.
No, for sure. Simpler times, Jeff.
Yes, exactly. Now you'd have to say, should I do a Kindle? Should I listen to it on Amplify? Where should I get or should I just plain and simple read?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of formats these days.
Analog version of reading.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You throw the phone out of the airplane, actually. So,
Right. Yes. Smart. Well, I love it.
yes.
All right. Well, what is top of mind for you right now?
Yeah, yeah. So today, one of the things I appreciate you having on the show, I didn't mention that, but one of the things that I really focus on now is really financial literacy for young adults. I wrote a book a little while back, really on that topic, and you see things that go on throughout time, but you don't really always put the pieces together. And whether it's student loan debt, a couple $1 trillion higher, at levels that we've never seen, or credit card debt. You talk about home ownership and a lot of different topics. When kids and young adults are starting out with so much debt, it's really hard to get assimilated and really have a family and, do what a lot of people used to take for granted. And so, I think it's fundamental, whether it's through family, or through, the YMCA, different programs that will provide opportunities for children to learn, especially young adults going, deciding what they're going to do with their life, and making good decisions.
It is I think it's one of the worst things that we've done to young people is what you're describing. Just the cost of education is extraordinary, and graduating with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and then we throw credit card offers their way on day one when they move into the
Yeah.
dorms and everything else. And now
What,
life is so much more expensive. So it's a
what,
lot.
what do you say? Every bowl game is, it seems like it's a credit card. So
Mm,
they're inundated constantly with the various credit card, bank commercials, whether it's even in the bookstores and various other places. It's hard to get away from, especially on social media. And it's easy to get caught up in the debt cycle. And it's, when you have very little income, it's very easy to get very upside down very quickly with it. And if it's, whether it's trying to get out of debt or having just a really poor credit score, it's really difficult to do things that, as I mentioned before, we used to take for granted. And there's been all kinds of studies done, But if there was a Price Waterhouse study that said, they surveyed millennials, and only about 24% actually had any proficiency in just understanding basic financial topics. So it's definitely an area, where you could say, well, there's marginal need for improvement. This is, I would say it's like the Grand Canyon of improvement at this point that we need.
So in basic financial topics, we don't need to turn everybody into an MBA or a
No.
whatever. What are some of these fundamentals?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I look at it almost as consumer finance, and it's things that used to be taken for granted. I mean, I'll go as simple as to say, well, how do you open a bank account? How do you write a check? And, what's the difference between a debit and credit card? And you could start asking those kind of questions or have somebody try to respond to that. And, they can get kind of upside down pretty quickly in terms of understanding what the differences are. And, it really, the kids need a framework or a blueprint, whether it's, buying their first car, should you buy or lease, should you buy, a used car, or just simply, when should you get off your parents' plan, or, should you do it when you start working, or should you wait a while? And these are all decisions that a lot of cases, once you go down a certain path, they're hard to kind of reverse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
I mean, the main point is that the more information that you can grasp or get to, the better off you can be. The challenge, though, is, with Google, and the internet, you could Google a topic and you get 300 million hits. That's great and everything, but really the problem that I see with it is it's very generalized and it's very scattered. In a lot of cases, it's trying to sell you something. And so, it's just really important to make decisions based upon your individual specific family circumstances.
We need to cut through the noise and have a clear signal. So you mentioned, did you say distributing through the YMCA?
Well, there are programs, whether it's the Boys and Girls Clubs, the Scouts, various ways that you can get better informed. But it's at this point about 22 states are starting to offer financial literacy courses as a mandate for graduating. Unfortunately, a lot of those classes are very generalized. And, a lot of what needs to happen is even earlier than that in middle school. It's a matter of managing expectations with college. Maybe it makes sense to go to a community college, versus going to a college that's super expensive or you may not have aid for. That money could be utilized in a lot of different other ways. But, really, from a parent standpoint, you have to really start having the conversations early to really manage expectations. Because if you don't say anything until the kid is accepted and once is going to a very expensive school, it's hard to kind of back out and reverse out of that.
Yeah, I think it is. While college is very expensive, it is certainly possible to pay for it if we make good decisions about it, about going to a community college or going to an in-state school versus going to California and going to college if you live in Nebraska. Sounds like fun, but it's going to cost you exponentially. It's going to be an impossible amount of debt that you're going to end up servicing. So,
And really, it's a matter of really, I go back to kind of mentoring as well as volunteering. If you can have the student or the young person do that in high school so that they can kind of mirror or see what people do, they may want to be a nurse or they may want to be a teacher, but when they see people do it or they're in that environment, they may just say, I just definitely don't want to do this. And they may look at something else. So sometimes, if you can be around people that are actually in the profession and get feedback from them and learn from them, you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls in terms of going down a road that, you go through 4 years of college, to be a teacher or a nurse or, anything for that matter. And then you decide you don't want to do it. And then you have to get even more education and in a lot of cases, more debt. So, the sooner that you can, manage that, and have a reasonable pathway, the easier it is to really, I think, to be financially successful, to build a real foundation. And that's part of the book that I did, it's about building a foundation. It was about putting the pieces together and not putting yourself at a real loss, before you even really start your adult life. I mean, that's with the student loans, credit cards, and a lot of these things, the kids are at a real disadvantage, before they even have a really chance to start the race.
So what you say is important. I'm not saying what you just said is important because it certainly is, but what we say is always important, but then how we say it is also important. You probably could have put me through a course when I was in junior high or high school on personal finance. And even if you had taught me the best information, I don't know that there's a guarantee that I would have absorbed it. So how do you think about that?
Well, I think that gets back to, really looking at a very early age and building a foundation, not when, they're in high school, really going into elementary school, just simple things like, whether it's volunteering, whether it's doing chores and getting an allowance, very few, I think that used to be very common. Now, not so much. The kids just kind of, it seems like a lot of kids just kind of get what they want. And, that can be a challenge in and of itself. And so, really looking back, it's more of a matter of, starting when they're extremely young, and, whether it's playing Monopoly or Life, board games, during the holidays where, you can actually, it's actually more reality than, what a lot of people even believe, in terms of life, just, different directions and ways you go, and just communicating the decisions that you've made. In a lot of cases, just being clear and being a source where they can go if they're not sure about something or they're afraid of something, and just talking to them about some of the mistakes that you've made, because that kind of, I think, humanizes the parent and allows really more of an open line of conversation. And really, I look at it, and, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's a, parent child, or whether it's a couple, with money, communication is paramount. If you do not communicate, you're going to have no shortage of, potholes, we'll call them.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt about that. With so many grown-ups struggling as well, whatever the percentage is, it's a big chunk of us that are living paycheck to
Yes.
paycheck. And that's certainly something that I experienced when I was in my 20s. So I totally get it. I also appreciate how important it is to be vulnerable and honest about the mistakes that you've made, because we've all made them, particularly when it comes to money. But how do you help people to become confident, or what do you tell people who say, well, I don't know anything about money. How am I going to teach my kids about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing, I mean, I go back to maybe something that's been lost as well. Really, it comes down to lifelong learning, and it's important, to continue to learn and evolve over time, and have trusted resources. And when I say trusted resources, advisors, people, whether it's, someone at your workplace that does the employee benefits, someone that you can go to with questions, and that is not conflicted. And that's really the thing. And that's the problem with the commercials, whether it's on your phone, when you're on, Facebook, there's just things popping up in every direction. They're targeting you in every direction. And, it's easy, like we talked about before, if you make some decisions that get you going the wrong way, it's easier. It's very easy to keep going down that road, but it's hard to reverse. And so, I would say what you don't want to do is say, I want to just, where people run into trouble is they say, well, they wake up one day and they realize they have all these issues. They know they've had them, but they want to just completely do 180-degree reversal. And really, based upon where you are at, you really have to put together a plan to back your way out and work through that. Because if you try to do too many things at one time, you're going to end up failing and really not doing anything, in most cases. And it's really about developing habits and just making them where they're actually, where you can execute on the habits and not be in a situation where you just try to do too much and then you get nothing done.
Yeah, I think that there is a big danger in trying to boil the ocean, which nobody's been able
Yeah.
to do that to this point. And that's why Dave Ramsey is so effective and successful at helping people get out of debt, because he gives very straightforward instructions
Mhm.
on step by step by step.
Exactly. And again, I mean, I think the most important thing, and I always look at budgeting, and there's probably about 6 or 7 different, there's even more than that, budgeting strategies. There's budgeting apps, there's spreadsheets. there's every conceivable type of budgeting format. It's really coming up and making decisions with what you're comfortable with and what works best for you. Because what may work best for your neighbor, office colleague, even someone giving you advice like Dave Ramsey, it just may not make sense for your specific circumstances. But it's a matter of really finding something that will work and get you to where financial independence, and get you where do you need to be.
Do you think that most people understand what that means? Financial independence?
So I think it's in the financial industry, I think it's more of a buzzword than anything else in the end. I would say, when I look at financial independence, you're not relying on anyone, as well as you're not staying up at night worrying about things.
Hmm.
I think that's really, especially as people approach retirement, there's tremendous anxiety and uncertainty. And, it's really a matter of kind of going through and putting the pieces together. But that's, I can sit here and say that, but that's easier said than done. And, I could have 10 different families and they could have 10 different situations, divorce, second marriages with, children, they could have debt, multiple houses. One could be working, one could not, you could have health issues. There's so many different situations that, really you have to take each person or family in an individual, set of circumstances and kind of work through that, to try to develop a customized plan and strategy for them.
Yeah. Wanted to circle back on the danger of trying to do too much all at once, and then it actually becomes demotivating. And when that happens, you certainly know that money has time value. So the more we wait to start pursuing and what's important to us, the harder it becomes to do that. So if you could just I don't know if it's valuable to just kind of talk about putting together a checklist of things, but we talked about budgeting, certainly cash
Mm-hmm.
flow, understanding kind of bank accounts and stuff like that. What are some core competencies if you can get people to focus on those first? Start here.
Yeah, yeah. So really what I would say is, I mean, if you can develop a financial inventory plan, and that's I'm big words and everything, but really what you want to do is, and I have often said, whether you move around, from jobs, or whether you change homes you live in and you move from area to area, you have different situations in life, start having children, if you get divorced or there's a death, what you want to do is really take an inventory of all your documents and all of your assets. And it doesn't mean to do it all at one time, but what you want to do is have a checklist, and you want to have something where you can target specific timelines in order to accomplish and complete the different tasks that you're putting in, that list. So in other words, you don't want something that's open-ended, but you don't want to overwhelm yourself at the same time. And so usually I say, one of the best things to do is really gather, where are your assets, making sure you have all of them, making sure they're all accounted for and they're just not things here, there, and everywhere. And by that, I mean, you want to get the statements, you want to understand, what you have and where it is. And then the same case for debts and liabilities. You want to get statements, as well as, kind of what your payoff schedule is. You want to look at your real estate. You want to look at, I use the example of beneficiaries, something that a lot of people don't look at. You want to make sure your beneficiaries are up to date, and there's a list, but really, you want to do one at a time and you want to build it out. And really, I say at the end, that's where you get to your cash flow, your income, your expenses, and really come up with a budget once you have an idea of where all of your assets and your liabilities are. And by doing that, you don't have any surprises trying to put a budget together and all of a sudden you have an expense that you forgot about. And in retirement, that's particularly important because you just don't have the time and you don't have the income, earned income from employment. So you have to be really sure of what your expenses are going to be, and what your income is.
So much of success in life is just knowing as much as you can. And when we don't have any idea how much we're spending and how much we're earning and what our debt is, where anything is, we're just sort of flying blind. So I think that that's an awesome starting point. Do you,
Exactly.
do you think everybody's capable of becoming financially successful?
I think they are. It's really a matter of just developing habits, like we talked about from the standpoint of budgeting, just taking time. It's really, I always say, it's a matter of just like your phone. It's a good idea to put it down in the evening. If you don't want to be on your phone when you're having dinner with your family. Uh, the same case with your finances. It's really a good idea, weekly, every few weeks to look at everything, making sure that, there's no purchases that you don't recognize, and making sure you can kind of have a general idea of where everything is, it doesn't mean doing everything every week or every month, but you just want to look at things to make sure, you're not creating, by not doing anything, in some cases you can create more problems for yourself. And that's an example, like, even I use the example of identity theft, by just not doing anything or thinking that you're not going to be a victim. In a lot of cases, you end up being a victim. You don't do the things like freeze your credit and do certain things that you just need to be done to avoid that. And there's just, steps in the process, but the main thing is to take the steps or start the process.
Yeah. To begin.
Yes. Yeah. The first, the hardest step is the first step. I mean, in the end, and then it's the next step and the step after that. Once you do take about 5 or 6 steps, it'll become a habit, and you won't even think about it, and you'll feel bad if you stop it. That's what you want to have in this kind of an environment where you're trying to put things together. And really, I look at your finances and life, your financial life, really, it's a big puzzle. And the more things you have, more complicated your life is, the more pieces you're going to have. And it's just like a puzzle. It takes a lot more time to solve. And that's really the way I would look at, your financial inventory, putting your financial life together. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you don't start, it's never going to happen.
I love the analogy of the puzzle, or it's a metaphor.
Yes.
I always confuse those two, Jeff.
Yes.
But when you're 18 years old, your financial puzzle is a 100-piece puzzle. When you're 50,
Yes.
it's a 1,000-piece puzzle. So better to get it under control younger
Yes.
than is later. So I think that there's a lot of
Yes.
wisdom there. I love it.
Yes.
Well, Jeff, you've given us a lot, but we're ready for your difference making tip. What do you have for
Yeah.
us?
So this is really, I think this is something really that could benefit anyone if they haven't done it. And really, it's a matter of looking out to see if you have any property that you're due. And when I say that, abandoned property, if you move from place to place, a lot of times, companies that you had bank accounts with, say you had stocks, you had an employer, utilities, they just lose your forward address. And so money that you're owed never gets to you. And so, there's been several studies. There's about 75 to 80 billion dollars that the states control just in abandoned property that they can't get to the end owner. And the way to do that is, if you go to missingmoney.com, you can type in your name in the search, and even by state, and it will show if you're due anything. And then what you can do is click on the button, and it will actually take you it'll take you to the state specific paperwork that you can send to the state in order to get any refund. And when I have meetings with clients, a lot of times I'll bring this up, and they say, I've lived in one place, there's no money owed or anything else. And I would say, probably about half the time when they go on there, there's an account that they've forgotten about.
Incredible, right there. Can you imagine thinking that you didn't have any money out there, and then you look and you have whatever it is. Any
Yeah.
found money is nothing but a good thing.
Exactly. And I mean, in some cases, I've had a few people where they've had shares of stock that they got, back 25 or 30 years ago, that they completely forgot about. And it's almost shocking the amount of money that, if in certain instances that the shares have grown to, and they're able to kind of capitalize on that if they just do the paperwork. So, and it's one less thing that you have out there that maybe down the road, if you don't do it, your family may have to do it when, you unfortunately become either disabled or pass away.
Well, I think that is great stuff. That definitely gets, come on. So it is missingmoney.com.
Yes, missingmoney.com. And it's a site that's set up by all the states. It allows you to go in and do searches either by state, or you can just do general searches. Obviously the more unique, like your name's pretty unique. My name's kind of unique with Panik. It's easier to kind of search. If you're John Smith, you need to be a little bit more, little bit, focus more on the search, but it will tell you the city where the money, was originally, I would say lost. So it gives you a real good idea of, whether it's yours or not.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they
Yeah.
engage with you? Where can they get a copy? Where can they get a copy of the book?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, jeffreypanik.com. That has information about me, about the book, financial literacy. You can also go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. The book is called Your Future Is Now. It's a guide to understanding your finances and gaining independence.
Excellent. Well, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, show Jeff your appreciation. Share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas, and share with everybody who is a young person or has young people that they care for, and help get them started on the path to financial literacy. Go to Jeffrey Panik, JeffreyPanik.com. Check out all things that Jeff is working on. Pick up your copy of Your Future Is Now at Amazon, and get in touch. Thanks again, Jeff.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity, George.
Sure. Finally, friendly reminder, it's never going to be anybody more interested in your financial success than you are. So do what we've been talking about, act accordingly.